It's Sunday morning on CBS, and here again is Charles Osgood.
Well, let me see. First there was Prime Suspect, and then there was Prime Suspect 2. I wonder what they're going to call this next one. I'm sure John Leonard can help us there. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Charles. Three-peat. From its stunning opening sequence Thursday night on public television to a last-minute surprise twist in the Triple Helix plot a month from now, Prime Suspect 3 is almost perfect television. Helen Mirren returns, of course, as Detective Chief Inspector Jane Tennyson of New Scotland Yard, a combination of Sigmund Freud, Doris Lessing, and Joan of Arc. Back, too, is Linda LaPlante, who wrote the first Prime Suspect and who swims like a submarine shark through the lower depths of London vice and the higher reaches of official corruption. David Drury directs all 4 episodes as if the camera itself, underwater in such shadows, had the bends. Even the music is creepy, wounded and romantic, or ominous and dissonant, like the anthem of some drowned republic. Weimar, maybe, before the Nazis.
Falling in love again, never wanted to.
We begin on Thursday in a gay cabaret, where Vernon, who wants to be Vera, is singing, while elsewhere a fugitive boy will burn.
Never wanted to. What am I to do? I can't help it.
Jay, it's me. Look, we can't just leave it like this.
Fresh from another dead-end love affair,
I'll call you later.
Well, I would like a full report on this fire business. And
Jane is assigned to a Soho vice investigation of rent boys on the game and the punters who buy and sell them.
Alan! What was all that about?
He wanted to know about Connie.
We're going for a little ride. Just you and me, all right?
My name's Connie, and I'm 16 years old.
She has no way of knowing that the murder of Connie Jenkins will lead her to a politically connected community teen center, to a photographer with his secret catch of pornographic videos, to the pimping fields of the bus and train stations and the meat market streets.
Are you serious? In 1979 and again in 19...
To confrontations with her own superiors.
I'm fully aware of the cases you're referring to.
Well, then you should have made whatever information you had available to me. I have wasted a considerable amount...
Waste being the operative word, Chief Inspector.
Been here since 2:30. I want to go to the...
And to a tantrum with the tabloid press.
Like to waste my time. Oh, I have every right, and I will keep you here as long as I wish. You have lied. You have withheld vital evidence, and you, Miss Smythe, have wasted my time. You want the ladies? Come with me.
Somebody's spying on her, and everybody's lying to her.
Do you know Connie? Colin Jenkins? No.
I'm sorry, I just must have confused the evening.
Really?
On the other hand, everybody is also possessed of a murderous desire to be somebody else, somebody other.
No, isn't. I'm gay.
And the songs they sing are impossible.
Come on, let's mingle.
I wanna be loved by you alone. Boop, boop, be doo. I wanna be kissed by you, just you.
And so for a month of Thursdays, as she chews gum to keep from smoking, Jane will absorb us in the sensational materials of a pedophile ring, police blackmail, homophobia, pornography and tabloid journalism, murder and suicide, AIDS and shrewd career moves. To these corruptions of the flesh and spirit, she will bring the usual scrupulous procedure involving telephone tapes, ambulance timetables, compromising snapshots, alibi analysis, interrogation, and deconstruction. But most of all, she'll bring the passionate sonar with which she listens, her workaholic smarts. In the first Prime Suspect, she had simultaneously to catch a killer and fight the gender wars at Scotland Yard. In the second, among West Indians, she saved London from racial riots. Starting this week, among orphans in a burning world, the riddle is identity. This is a lot to be grateful for, but there's more. In Helen Mirren's brilliant Jane, we see that intelligence is sexy, which is good news for the human species.
The Nissan Altima has more front headroom than a Mercedes E320. It also has more rear headroom, more rear leg room, and more overall room. Yet it's priced $20,000 less, which means with this luxury sedan, you'll be able to add a room. The Nissan Altima. It's time to expect more from a car.
Dean Witter believed every success story was unique.
We have a sacred trust to protect our investors.
Whether it's the success of a small business,
to maintain conservative policies,
saving for college,
to put the interest of our clients first,
or planning an early retirement. From getting in on the ground floor to getting all the way to the top, Dean Witter is there to help every client make it every step of the way. Dean Witter.
We measure success one investor at a time.
When brewing a whole pot of coffee doesn't make sense, choose new Maxwell House Filter Pack Singles. The fresh brewed taste of Maxwell House coffee, one cup at a time. Filter Pack Singles. New from Maxwell House.
Every year, American business wastes millions of dollars on international calls by using the wrong long-distance company. Now you don't have to waste that money. Introducing MCI's Proof Positive Worldwide. Save up to 50% off typical international calls around the world. Call by June 30th and get 1 month of free long distance. Call MCI now and put your money back in your business.
You'd think that people would live the longest where life was easy, where the weather was balmy and the breezes mild, and where nature was not an opponent always to be struggled against. That makes sense. It just happens not to be so. Here is a postcard from Nebraska from Roger Welsh.
There are a lot of jokes about the large number of old people who live in Nebraska's small towns. They say, for example, that we don't really live longer. It just seems that way because of the miserable weather and unimpressive scenery. Others insist that we do live longer because that miserable weather and unimpressive scenery has driven away or killed off all the weaklings and left nothing here but us brutes and boneheads. The fact of the matter is, something is going on because there are a lot of old folks here. More, as a matter of fact, than almost anywhere else in the country. When you retire, aren't you supposed to just sit around and watch television?
Oh, I suppose you are, but I'm too healthy to do that.
Oh, that's boring.
It's all caramel. Okay.
We usually dump it in the boiler.
Out of 100 American counties where a lot of the elderly population is over 75 years old, the great majority is on the plains, forming a long, continuous geriatric spine running up and down the middle of the nation. Whatever the reasons for that, greater longevity, the immigration of young people out of the rural countryside, it's a matter of concern to small communities all along that line, from Texas to North Dakota. There are only 3 counties in the entire nation that have a concentration of elderly over 15%, and this is one of them, Cambridge, Nebraska, Furnace County. It's a unique community, a look into America's 21st century, when the elderly will be an ever larger presence. How's food down this end? About the same as that end?
Good as always.
Pretty good?
Good as always.
You come here often?
Just 5 times a week.
Just 5 times a week? That's pretty good. Is it the food or the company that brings you here?
Both. I don't like to cook, and I like the company.
Well, that just takes care of both. The Cambridge Senior Citizen Center is a gathering place for these folks.
Thank you.
Why would people who are ready to take it easy stay here rather than head south?
Crime rate, cost of living.
Gladys, what kind of chicken do you want?
Lori Ten Benzel is the center's director.
They can live here for their Social Security check, basically. A lot of them don't have retirement. They didn't think of that when they were raising their families during the Depression. I think they are happy here.
I got here about 5 o'clock in the morning.
The center provides low-cost noon meals for Cambridge seniors, as much a social as nutritional event. It looks to me like people come here not just simply for a meal, but because there's a lot of good company.
Might be that maybe the women don't want to cook it.
Oh, you think that's why everybody comes here for a meal?
I said it might.
You're in trouble, buddy. What are you guys up to here this morning?
Well, we're trying to pop a little hobo popcorn.
What's the difference between hobo popcorn and regular popcorn?
Well, I can't think that's just the way we're dressed. It's a secret.
Well, that's what they told me over at the table. You guys are the cooks, and you tell me what's in this stuff.
No, just popcorn and oil.
Oh, there's
Maybe
something else in there.
stuff.
It tastes pretty good for just popcorn and oil.
A few little other ingredients.
Secret, huh?
Yeah, we don't tell nobody that.
Every week, Glenn Moore and Rex Poppert make their secret ingredient hobo popcorn. They sell it on the town's main street to generate additional funding for the center they have come to enjoy and depend on. What'd you do before you retired and started making hobo corn?
He was a carpenter, and I'd done about everything under the book.
Well, I thought when you retired, you're supposed to just sit around and watch television.
So that gets a little bit tiresome, too. You die doing that.
What do you do with the rest of your week when you're a senior citizen in Cambridge?
Just mess around. There's always something to do in there.
Do a little gossiping now and then?
Well, you couldn't call it gossiping. It's concerned citizens, you know. 4 and 1 is 5.
This unique concentration of elderly carries with it some social and economic problems for communities like Cambridge, but can also be a powerful and rich benefit. An old horse trader once said, "You live and you learn, and then you die and forget it all." And that may be true where there are no old people, or where old people and their wisdom are not held in high regard.
What's the secret recipe?
But not in Cambridge, Nebraska. They're making sure that senior citizens here, their knowledge, humor, energy, love, and wisdom are not squandered. How old are you fellas? Oh, come on, you gotta confess.
I'm 83.
83?
79.
79. So how much longer do you think you're gonna be at this? Another 20, 30 years?
Oh, yeah, anyhow. Anyhow, that long. I hope.
Well, come on, get to going.
You better go, Roman. You better go.
Oh, you better go.
Mary Murphy has autism, a condition that causes her to recede into a world of her own. What she sees through her eyes, what goes on in her head, only Mary knows.
When we started, Mary didn't even respond to a human voice.
On the next Pulse, find out why autism was originally thought to be untreatable and how an army of volunteers are helping Mary to connect with people around her. Pulse, tonight at 6:30 on Channel 10.
Pete Wilson talks tough on crime, but he completely failed his greatest test. During the LA riots, he let the National Guard sit on its hands as mobs of criminals burned and looted my native city for days. That's leadership. And Wilson's election year crime summit, getting together with a bunch of other politicians to talk about crime. Did that make our streets any safer? As governor, I'll fulfill my oath of office and protect the lives and property of all Californians. I'm Ron Unz.
Ron Unz, the Republican for governor.
Village RV is extending the RV Super Sale specials throughout the entire month of April. If you didn't get to take advantage of those incredible deals, you still have time. See why everyone is shopping at Village RV. We're proud of our newly expanded and updated service department. Knowledgeable technicians will service your RV right the first time. While waiting for service, check out our complete parts store. Find quality parts at super sale prices. That's Village RV, located freeway close in Davis and Fairfield.
Hang out with some fun friends. Relaxing at the Sacramento Zoo. At the Sacramento Zoo, you can learn about programs for endangered species, get up close and personal, or just enjoy the unique beauty you'll find here. So for exciting adventures from Africa to America, relax and learn. Visit the Sacramento Zoo today. Your zoo is growing. Look for Lake Victoria opening early 1995.
Here is what Mark Antony said in William Shakespeare's play about Julius Caesar. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. If all you remember about Richard Nixon is the convulsion called Watergate, then perhaps you've begun to forget already some other hallmarks of his presidency. From Leslie Stahl now, a history lesson, just to round out the picture.
February 21st, 1972, the start of what Richard Nixon called the week that changed the world. Richard Nixon, the Cold Warrior's Cold Warrior, arriving in the heart of the enemy camp, Beijing, ending almost 25 years of hostility to the People's Republic of China. It was the high water mark of a foreign policy that lived beyond his disgraced presidency. In the first of a series of pictures that turned history on its head, the president shook hands with Prime Minister Zhou Enlai. The American and Chinese flags, the national anthems, symptoms and sounds of a changing world. Then the handshake that few thought would ever happen. Richard Nixon and the father figure of the Chinese Revolution, Mao Zedong. At a banquet in the Great Hall of the People, a gigantic dining room, Zhou and then Nixon formalized the change in their relationship.
To the health of all our friends and comrades present, and to the friendship between the Chinese and American peoples.
Seize the day, seize the hour. This is the hour. This is the day for our two peoples to rise to the heights of greatness which can build a new and a better world.
The vision of a new world order drove Mr. Nixon's foreign policy with equal parts publicity and secrecy. He inherited the Vietnam War from his predecessor, Lyndon Johnson, saying he had a secret plan to end the war. But the plan turned out to be something less than promised.
We have adopted a plan which we have worked out in cooperation with the South Vietnamese for the complete withdrawal of all U.S. combat ground forces and their replacement by South Vietnamese forces on an orderly, scheduled timetable. This withdrawal will be made from strength and not from weakness.
But even as he was withdrawing American troops, he significantly widened the war, first by secretly using B-52s to bomb previously neutral Cambodia, then by launching an invasion of Cambodia in 1970. But no matter what he tried, the war and the Paris peace talks dragged on. As it turned out, the openings to China and later to the Soviet Union, and everyone's growing exhaustion with the war, changed the basic equation. The United States and the People's Republic of China were talking to one another. Sensing the war weariness, North Vietnam launches a ferocious offensive in the spring of 1972, on the eve of the president's historic trip to the Soviet Union. Mr. Nixon reacts violently. He sends American planes against advancing communist forces. He orders the Navy to bombard North Vietnam. And on the eve of his departure for the Soviet Union, he makes one of his toughest, most controversial decisions.
There's only one way to stop the killing. That is to keep the weapons of war out of the hands of the international outlaws of North Vietnam.
He orders the mining of Haiphong and Hanoi harbors, bottling up Soviet shipping in the process.
No Soviet soldiers are threatened in Vietnam. 60,000 Americans are threatened. We expect you to help your allies, and you cannot expect us to do other than to continue to help our allies.
The gamble works. On May 22, 1972, the president flies into Moscow still welcomed, and the North Vietnamese are stalled in South Vietnam. It is a triumphant visit. Day after day for a long week, Nixon and the Soviet leaders sign a procession of agreements crowned by the first attempt to limit the explosion of nuclear weapons on both sides, the Strategic Arms Limitation Agreement. On Sunday, May 28th, Richard Nixon, the implacable enemy of the Soviet Union, speaks on television to the Russian people.
We seek the right to live in peace, not only for ourselves, but for all the peoples of this earth. Our power will only be used to keep the peace, never to break it, only to defend freedom, never to destroy it.
The twin trips, resumption of the savage bombing, and the mining of Haiphong and Hanoi seem to pay dividends in Vietnam.
We believe that peace is at hand. We believe that an agreement is within sight.
But it was not to be. The talk stalled, and so the president ordered the heaviest airstrikes of the war, the Christmas bombings. In the space of 12 days, the U.S. dropped over 36,000 tons of bombs on North Vietnam, more than all the bombs dropped between 1969 and 71. It seemed to work.
Good evening. I have asked for this radio and television time tonight for the purpose of announcing that we today have concluded an agreement to end the war and bring peace with honor in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia.
On January 28, 1973, Secretary of State William Rogers signed a ceasefire agreement in Paris. America could finally extricate itself from the quagmire of Vietnam. But the shadow of Watergate gradually begins to intrude into foreign policy. The Senate suspends its Watergate hearings for a week in deference to a return visit to Washington from Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev. They repeat in Washington what they had done in Moscow. They pledge mutual restraint, promise a new era in Soviet-American relations. The president calls it détente. On October 6, 1973, détente is put to a critical test in the Middle East. Egypt and Syria attack Israel, starting the Yom Kippur War. The president quickly proposes an informal ceasefire, but the Russians reject it. They even open an airlift of fresh military supplies to Egypt and Syria. Finally, on October 22nd, a ceasefire agreement is reached in Moscow. And in January 1974, after a disengagement of forces, a fragile process of Middle East accommodation begins, almost the final foreign policy act of a dying presidency. If foreign policy was the hallmark of the Nixon presidency, it would also be the vehicle he used to resurrect his reputation. He may have been disgraced at home, but in China and in the Soviet Union, he was still viewed as the man who took chances to overcome the years of enmity and hostility. He was welcomed back to China in 1982 with the honors accorded a visiting head of state. And he went back to the Soviet Union no less than 5 times after he resigned. But even there, controversies seemed to follow him. On his last trip early in 1994, he angered Russian President Yeltsin by visiting Yeltsin's opponents. As one of the former president's aides said, Mr. Nixon has had his share of disappointment in his life, some of them more serious than this one. He will manage.
South Africa holds its breath as the clock ticks down to its first free elections ever. With only days to go, big questions remain. Can a new government function? Will violence break out? Will people be able to go about their daily lives? Dan Rather reports from the South African campaign trail tomorrow on the CBS Evening News.
This is CBS. You're watching KXTV, Sacramento, Stockton, Modesto.
Is the hassle of hiring new employees weighing you down?
Hey, what's with the ball and chain?
Didn't you hear? Somebody just quit. I'll be chained to this desk until I hire someone new. Call the paper, run an ad.
Remember what happened the last time we ran an ad?
For a no-fee, no-hassle employment service, call PICK today.
Hi, folks. Dennis Bynum for Stansel's Toyota in Placerville. That's right, Stansel's. I've made a move, and so should you. We've always been known for lower prices and better payments, and this is how we're going to prove it. $49 down delivers any used car in stock. That's right. Get you a 90 Grand Am loaded with all the features for as low as $169 a month. Or an 89 Taurus with all the features for $149 a month. So pick up that phone and call us collect. 622-6232. And remember, drive up the hill to Placerville, where we're just a short drive from high pressure and high prices.
There is so much dissatisfaction in spending your hard-earned money today that when people experience a store that is legitimately interested in their satisfaction, I think people respond extremely well to that experience. At the Men's Warehouse, you're going to find popular priced, branded clothing, brands that you have heard of with the best service that you'll ever get in buying a suit. I guarantee it.
Call 1-800-776-SUIT.
Every day, they work the land to make the world a better place. And may be the world's most active environmentalists, because they know their responsibility goes beyond just their plot of land. And producing a safe and abundant supply of food is pretty important. They don't just have their eye on a time clock, but on the future. They are America's farmers, and the land is their legacy.
Dum-da-dum-dum-dum. Lovely. What is this? I don't know, but they sure are hungry.
Boy, looks like you could use Ortho-Diazinon Plus.
I could?
Yeah, it easily gets rid of over 100 outdoor insects.
Take that, whatever you are.
Ortho-Diazinon Plus for beautiful bug-free shrubs, trees, and lawns.
Ah, yes. Another attack thwarted, another azalea saved.
Ortho. You're working too hard without us.
Most people have something they're willing to pay a premium for. For some, it's art. For some, it's entertainment. For others, it's travel. Acura. Some things are worth the price.
It's Sunday morning on CBS, and here again is Charles Osgood.
It's another very eventful and confusing time in Bosnia. David Martin is into the Pentagon this morning to discuss the situation with us. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Charles.
There was a deadline set last night. David, did it seem to work?
Yeah, if you say that the object of the game here is to get the Serbs to back off without actually having to use military force, then you'd have to say that yesterday was a success. But I think at the same time it exposed exactly why the rest of the world has been so ineffective in stopping the bloodshed in Bosnia. On the one hand, you have the Serbs who know exactly what they want. They want to create a greater Serbia by gobbling up as much of Bosnia as possible. And on the other hand, you have the United Nations and NATO, two international organizations made up of disparate countries with disparate national interests. And getting them to agree even under the best of circumstances is a difficult business, and Bosnia certainly is not the best of circumstances. Trying to stop a war without actually getting sucked into it yourself is a tricky piece of work. And yesterday, when NATO wanted to bomb and the UN wanted to negotiate, I think revealed how fundamental the differences can be. And more importantly, I think it revealed to the Serbs how fundamental the differences can be, and I'm sure that they are going to try and exploit those differences in the future.
Was that a very big surprise to the military that they refused, that the United Nations refused to give permission for it?
Yeah. They thought they had it all lined up, and it just drives them crazy, because getting the UN involved in a military decision just runs counter to all of the doctrine on military command and control. What you need when you're running a military operation is what the military calls unity of command. One person making the decision down one chain of command so you know exactly who's responsible and when. And when you have this sort of dual command setup with NATO making decisions on one hand but subject to a veto by the UN on the other, even when they agree, it's cumbersome. And of course, when they disagree, it just drives everybody to frustration.
It's also frustrating, I'm sure, for President Clinton as the commander-in-chief. He just can't say anything he wants to say or give any orders he wants to give. He has to sort of defer to these others as well.
Well, yeah, but you know, the President of the United States is almost always going to defer to military advice. It is hard for a commander-in-chief to order things that run counter to what his military advisors are saying. And I think that's particularly true of this president because, of course, his own history with the military is such that his military credentials are suspect. And in effect, this military, the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the United States, almost have a veto power over what this president can do in a military sense.
And it was no doubt on military advice that the president announced the plan to extend the bombings to the other so-called safe havens in Bosnia.
This is, for once, a credible military threat. The threat of these limited airstrikes that would go against a particular offending Serb gun or a particular offending Serb tank was not a credible military threat. But now you're talking about an honest-to-goodness bombing campaign. It may not be a bombing campaign of the same magnitude as Desert Storm, where Allied warplanes were flying 1,000 to 2,000 sorties a day, but it would be a campaign involving hundreds of sorties a day, and the Serbs know a real military threat when they see one, which is why I think they backed off.
And is it thought there that the Serbs are deployed in such a way that they would be targets?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of difficulties. It's not the wide open spaces of the Iraqi desert, but you can't hide everything. You can move tanks around, you can move guns around, you can put them in forests, but it's hard to move an ammo dump around. It's hard to move a fuel depot around. Those things, on good days, when the weather is clear, you can pinpoint, and on the next day the weather's clear, you can go back and you can hit them with precision-guided munitions.
Gorazda still seems to be the focus, David. Does the fact that there's this United Nations convoy on the site now, does that sort of tie NATO's hands?
Well, sort of yes and no. I mean, obviously you don't want to expose the UN peacekeepers in Gorazda to further attacks by launching your own attacks against the Serb military. But on the other hand, NATO has the authority to launch airstrikes if UN peacekeepers get in trouble. They can call in these close air support strikes. Now, they don't really change the equation on the ground, but at least they can sometimes force the attacking force to back off.
Where is the military focusing now, David, in this very chaotic kind of situation? What can we look for next?
Well, you can look for the U.S. military to do its darndest to stay out of this thing. The real hard part hasn't come yet, Charles, and the hard part is, what if you get a peace settlement? Then the U.S. is committed to putting in these 25,000 American peacekeepers, and that, I think, probably has them much more concerned. Troops on the ground, that has them much more concerned than the prospect of flying airstrikes.
Thank you very much, David. David Martin at the Pentagon.
I used to think choosing to be healthier was this monumental change, but now I think it's really a lot of little changes you can make. Even something as small as this, grape nuts. Grape nuts hasn't been processed into something it's not. It's all natural, fat-free, with this nutty taste I like. Grape nuts makes me feel so good, so you just have to try it. It's just a little change, but sometimes the littlest things can help make a big difference.
Make a healthy little change to grape nut cereal.
are those who say that America is having a hard time getting off the ground. They say that the American spirit no longer soars. That the American worker no longer rises to the occasion. And that American companies no longer reach for the stars. But we'll just continue to introduce evidence that says otherwise.
It's a kick. You got your vitamin A, your vitamin C. I like it because it has those beta carotenes in it.
What's that word?
Beta carotenes.
It's zippy kind of thing, a zippy thing.
100% Colombian. U-Ban. Taste the spirit of coffee.
Imagine this. Imagine strolling into a theater in broad daylight, before noon even, and making yourself comfortable in a seat and then staying there through lunchtime, through the busiest hours of the day, through dusk and through dinner, and through the darkness of early evening, and through the deeper darkness that follows. Imagine sitting in that seat in a theater almost until midnight. What on earth would make a body want to do a thing like that?
Because he's one of the greatest.
Irving Berlin. You look like Irving. The thing to sing since Hester Prynne started to sin.
If you love theater, you have to love Irving Berlin. I mean, he is the American musical theater.
Irving Berlin made songs when nowadays they're only making din.
11 hours, 12 hours of Berlin. That's not enough. There should be 24.
All alone by the telephone.
Don't cry, sir, don't cry.
Waiting for a ring-a-ting-a-ling. I'm all alone.
Ah, yes, Irving Berlin. So that is why there is a line outside Symphony Space on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Feeling blue.
Well, that is why there is a line inside Symphony Space, too, of performers waiting in the wings.
This is the Army District Show.
Pretty nearly every singer and musician in New York wanted a chance to perform a Berlin song on this day of all days and night of all nights. So they will be lining up, too, waking up earlier than they might have otherwise, or racing here between matinee and evening performances of the great Broadway shows, or dropping by when they can from jazz and supper clubs and cabarets. More than 100 performers will appear on this stage by the time all is said and done, as if all could be said and done even in 12 hours, where Irving Berlin is concerned.
It is my very special pleasure to bring to this stage someone who has a triple reason for being here.
Ask Isaiah Sheffer, one of the guiding lights of Symphony Space, about Irving Berlin.
He was an immigrant whose first language was Yiddish as a kid, but then quickly on the streets of New York became an English-speaking song plugger in Bowery saloons, and very early on was a very successful songwriter. Even before Alexander's Ragtime Band, which was written in 1911, he had hit songs as early as 1907, and he lived to 1989. That is a span no one else will ever match or could ever match.
He talked fast.
Or ask Kitty Carlisle Hart. She was a notable of the Broadway stage herself and was married until his death to the playwright Moss Hart, who wrote 3 musicals with Irving Berlin.
And to tell you the truth, I honestly believe that in the next century, the one that will be remembered the most by the most people of all of the famous American songwriters, and we invented the American musical theater, I think Irving Berlin will be the one that will be the most remembered, because his music was the most available. His lyrics were the most available. They were the most touching to a vast number of people. Not for just an hour, not for just a day, not for just a year, but always
Nothing but blue skies do I see.
We all feel we grew up on the music of Irving Berlin.
Nothing but bluebirds from now on.
But Mary Ellen Barrett, Linda Emmett, and Elizabeth Peters actually did. They are Irving Berlin's daughters.
He was a wonderful father. What I remember is that when I had done something really terrible, my mother would always bawl me out and then say, and you wait till your father gets home. And my father would get home and would do nothing.
We were having lunch and my mother turned to me and she said, Linda, take your elbows off the table. And I said, well, Daddy has his elbows on the table. And my mother said, well, Daddy is a genius.
He would be having a conversation with him, and suddenly the conversation would stop, and he'd begin whistling under his breath.
Of course he whistled. You cannot have so much music inside you without some of it simply bubbling up and spilling out from time to time.
Let's take an old-fashioned walk. What a tale could be told if we went for an old-fashioned walk. She would come around and say, have you got any monotony today?
A doll I can carry, the girl that I marry must be.
Some of those songs people know, like The Air. Others are discovery. He saved songs and then he'd suddenly remember one and pull it out. So I like to think that he would enjoy the sight of his daughters going into that trunk.
What was the Irving Berlin trunk is now a cluttered room. The drawers and boxes here at the Irving Berlin Archive are crammed almost as full of music as he himself must have been. There are treasures everywhere in this room. Perhaps most astonishingly, more than a few songs that have hardly been heard since he first whistled them, jotted them down, and filed them away. If you were Irving Berlin, you could afford to do that. Whistle and jot and file away. Ever heard this one? Cohen owes me $97.
I've got something to tell him before I pass away. Cohen owes me $97, and it's up to you to see the Cohen pay.
Now, here's a song from the Irving Berlin archives that you know. Smile and Show Your Dimple. Oh, you only think you don't know it. This was written for World War I. Smile and show your dimple. You'll find it's very simple. You can think of something comical in a very little while. Well, that, of course, is the tune that became In Your Easter Bonnet, with all the frills upon it, you'll be the fairest lady in the Easter parade.
Come on along, come on along, come on along, and let me take you by the hand up to the man who's the leader of the band.
Tell the truth, it seemed a little mad at first, didn't it? A 12-hour marathon of music by one man. Does it seem mad now? Think of a year in this country from ragtime to our time. Think of a song. Who wrote that song you are thinking of?
The moon descended and I found with the break of dawn you and the song are gone, but the melody lingers on.
just 1 year, something happened to 640 million pounds of chemical pollutants. Instead of becoming waste, they were captured for recycling. The members and partners of the Chemical Manufacturers Association, working for change.
Do you have fresh fruit salad, yogurt? Okay, what vegetables do you have?
French fried, home fried, and mashed.
Do you have anything that's good for me?
I got Tums.
If I don't eat your food, I don't need the Tums.
But you do. Tums has calcium.
Do these? No. They have aluminum and magnesium. Of these, only Tums helps knock out heartburn.
Pow! And gives you calcium.
Something my body needs anyway. What the heck? Give me the burger with everything, including the Tums.
Calcium-rich Tums.
You missed all the excitement.
The office?
Yep. Marketing forgot the instruction sheets for the Mr. Squiggly robots.
No. All 50,000?
Mm-hmm. So I'm taking care of it.
That's 50,000 copies by morning.
No problem.
You're going to be working all night.
Well, actually, my staff is working on it, saving us a fortune in overtime.
What staff? When did you get a staff?
Kinko's, your branch office, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I don't have a staff.
Hi, Tony Chase. We're here to introduce a great new savings program from MCI.
It's called Best Friends.
Best Friends from MCI. And it's simple. If you and a friend you call a lot both join MCI and Best Friends, you will save 40% on calls to each other from now on.
40%. 40%
From now on.
It's a great deal.
Not to mention the savings you can get on other calls with friends and family.
On calls to 19 more people you call frequently.
Best Friends is the least expensive way
for two friends to call each other. Aww.
Safe Haven now. This Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. on CBS, and at the very same time on the Fox Television Network 2, there will be a broadcast called Kids Killing Kids. Before that broadcast and after it, and all week long, in fact, schools and church and civic groups and organizations of teachers and doctors and politicians, law enforcement officials across the country will be holding meetings and forums to ask one question: what can we do to stop the children of America from killing one another? In one place, at least, as Terrence Smith is about to tell us, an answer to that question has already been suggested.
This is for my homie. This is for my homie. Well. See you when I get there with Almighty God, with Almighty God.
The kids in America's cities know death. It tracks them in the streets. It catches them through drugs and liquor, guns and AIDS.
Memories going down the drain.
These kids are the lucky ones. They are only acting. A drama group portraying the violent life around them, sending out a warning to other kids that what may seem cool can also be fatal.
It's okay, girl. Come on. He's cool. All right. What did y'all think about this? Did it make you think about anything?
These young people are part of a great experiment. They have helped create their own church, the Shekinah Youth Chapel. It's an outgrowth of the Allen AME Church in the New York City neighborhood of Jamaica, Queens.
Is this the area, particularly at night, that you were talking about, where kids are encountering violence?
You would have violence, that is correct. You had an 11-year-old killed at a beauty shop right up the streets.
The Reverend Floyd Flake is pastor of the Allen Church and represents this neighborhood in Congress. He conceived of the idea of the Shekinah Youth Chapel, a church organized by and for young people.
I think it's been a marvelous experience for the kids, and they are coming. We can't house them anymore, and we had no idea it would take off like this.
It's basically tripled.
Yes, without a doubt.
A year and a half.
That's correct.
The kids run the show here at the Shekinah Youth Chapel. They administer the funds, sit on the board of trustees, and plan the programs and services. The adults stay in the background.
Well, you know something? Forget y'all. I don't need y'all.
Oh, no.
You're
so fast for yourself. Help me, Lord. All right.
The drama group meets on Thursdays, but every afternoon, immediately after school, the church fills with young people.
find the church to be a safe haven from the negative things outside of the church, because every day we go to school, there's so many things happening as far as peer pressure, and we don't know which direction we want to go, and then you have the drugs, and you have the violence, you have the killings. It's just so many things. And if we can find a positive place to come and express ourselves, then this is the place to be.
Which of you has had, you keep talking about it, had the experience of people being shot or even killed in your school?
You can't hide from it. You walk down the street, you see it.
Actually, my neighborhood is type safe, but just a couple of months ago, one of my closest friends that go to my school had got shot up, her and her boyfriend, across the street from my house in an alley, and me and my cousin found their bodies. And all I saw was 2 bodies there, and I just freaked out. And then when I found out it was my girl, you know, it was just so devastating, and it was over some he say, she say. It didn't have to do with drugs. It was over some he say, she say.
In addition to their own activities, the kids have their own pastor, the Reverend Anthony Lucas, who at 28 is just a few years older than many of them.
He is the King of Kings. We sing the praises to our King, for he's the King of Kings.
I'm at that age where I'm young enough to understand and speak their language, but old enough to administrate the programs that are needed and to sort of be a liaison between Pastor Flake and the young people.
The Reverend Lucas has established a special relationship with the kids of the Shekinah Chapel on their terms.
That God moves through different mediums. I don't believe God is moving the same way he did in the 1940s. I want you to understand that. God is doing a new thing. Come on, amen. I said God is doing a new thing. God can move through rap. God can move through dance. God can move through stepping. As long as God gets the glory and God anoints it, it'll be all right. No more drugs, no more prostitution, no more high school dropouts, no more suicide. My mind is in the hands of God.
The youthful service at Shekinah is drawing more and more kids every week. Here, it is the kids who bring their parents to church.
You can be somebody, and you can be somebody right now.
The new recruits at Shekinah include some desperate kids reaching out for help. Just last Sunday, Trenton Bethea walked into Shekinah for the first time.
If I wasn't here, I'd probably be somewhere else trying to get some money, sticking somebody up. I want to go through my talents and get my talents going. I mean, because I sing, I perform. I want to do all that. I can't stay on the streets. If I stay on the streets, I'm going to stay on the streets all my life. That's not good for nobody.
I want to meet with you Tuesday. I want you to come in, we're going to talk this Tuesday, okay?
Okay, what time?
Do you work?
Nah.
The Shekinah Youth Chapel began as something of an experiment, but its founder, the Reverend Flake, believes that with its success, it can now serve as a model for other communities.
I think this is replicable in the smallest church, the largest church. I mean, if there are 3 kids, if there are 30 kids, if there are 300, or if there are 700, 800 like there are here. I don't think that there is a limit on what can be done. I think it becomes a question of will and priority.
This generation is dealing with things that I never heard of in my life. AIDS on one side, and black on black crime is out of hand, but God wants to make a change. Each of you can reach 3 or 4 people. God can use you to minister to those people, and those 3 people will reach other 3 people, and it will be a chain reaction. And before you know, we have a new revolution going on, a new movement, a new generation that will stand up and say, we are not failures.
I'm so bad, that's why I'm glad
You're so good.
Are you bad about wanting rich desserts? Then you're gonna love Smart Style from Mrs. Smith's. Sinfully delicious, yet they're made with sensible ingredients that can be part of a smart way to eat. Mrs. Smith's Smart Style desserts. Go ahead, live well, eat well, have dessert.
I'm so bad, that's why I'm glad. You're so good.
1847, Werner Siemens opens his first factory and begins to manufacture the world's most advanced telegraph. That was then. This is now. Today, Siemens has 60 factories all across America, with over 15,000 manufacturing people turning out an astonishing variety of high-tech electronic and electrical products with quality American industry can count on. Siemens, precision thinking.
Over the years, Canon color copiers have copied everything from pie charts to architectural renderings, from computer-generated presentations to top-secret documents. In fact, since Canon introduced the first color laser copier in 1987, our copiers have made over 1 billion high-quality color copies. And that kind of experience is sure to leave you smiling. To see how easy it is to own a Canon color copier, call 1-800-OK-CANON.
Don't you wish you could be this comfortable with all your decisions? Acura. Some things are worth the price.
Face the Nation looks at the legacy of Richard Nixon later this morning on CBS. President Nixon's former chief of staff, Alexander Haig, is among Bob Schieffer's guests. And joining them, Senator William Cohen, Nixon historian Gary Wills, and Washington writer Haynes Johnson. We leave you this morning in the Napa Valley of Northern California near Clear Lake. A word of warning, though. Remember what happened to Dorothy and Toto and the Cowardly Lion when they went traipsing through a field of poppies? You better stay awake now. I'm Charles Osgood. I hope you'll join us here again next Sunday morning. Until then, see you on the radio.
For a printed transcript, send $5 to Sunday Morning Transcript, Box 7, Livingston, New Jersey, 07039. For a video cassette of selected segments of This Sunday Morning, call 1-800-242-7747.
Experience CBS News.